Hey everybody, if you are here watching this on Tom Spina Designs, you no doubt know who Chris Walas is and some of the amazing effects work he has done on movies like Gremlins, Dragonslayer, Enemy Mine, Arachnophobia, The Fly 2, and apparently even Airplane, which is just crazy cool. Chris was also responsible for the melting heads in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And the real focus of what we're talking about today, Chris, while at ILM, was one of the first people to join the creature crew for Return of the Jedi. And he was part of the team that made concept monsters and maquettes to design all the creatures in Jabba the Hutt's palace. And we go in depth on a bunch of those designs. It's a really fun chat. We had to do our parts independently because Chris has some hearing issues, but it's still a really fun conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Chris is doing a lot of fun stuff right now on Instagram. He's retired and he's just making cool things. So go follow him there. He's at Chris Walas. If you are watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. You will get lots more content like this. We're doing many more of these great interviews with some of these creators, the people that inspired me growing up and still do today. And if you're the type of person who follows our work, thank you very much. Continue to follow us. We're at Tom Spina Designs on all the socials, and follow at Regal Robot, my other company, where we're doing the licensed limited edition replicas of these concept maquettes that I'm talking about with Chris, scanned off the originals in the archives. It's a really fun time. It's a lot of amazing stuff, so please check that out too. With no further ado.
So before we go back in time, I'm loving your current work. Absolutely wild papier-mâché creatures, apes, videos, Halloween displays. It looks like you're having fun.
I am having fun. I will be 70 this year, and so I finally reached old manhood, and it's great. I'm fully retired, and I can do what I want. It was really weird to get to that point of being able to actually sort of commit to being retired, because it's effects work is very tense, demanding kind of stuff. It's not easy to let go. But once I did that, I was actually a little lost for a while, because suddenly I could do whatever I wanted, and it didn't have to work to a script or somebody else's vision or anything like that. So it was a little bit of a learning curve for me to do my own stuff. I mean, I always had to a point, but my drive was always the work. So, yeah, things just went kind of odd for a while there while I was sorting out what I wanted to do or not. I knew I really kind of wanted to walk away from all the techniques and materials that I used for my career and get into a lot of less toxic stuff, cheaper stuff, So the papier-mâché thing came about almost accidentally. I was getting ear implants. I'd had one, and I was having my second one put in. I knew there's a sort of a learning curve with these things as well. It takes a little while to get used to them. So I knew I was going to not be very functional in a sort of social manner or anything like that. So it was I was looking online and just trying to find stuff that I could do a lot of and do it cheaply, and came across some papier-mâché stuff on Facebook. I was just like, oh, that's pretty cool, actually. I never knew papier-mâché could do that kind of stuff. And the more I studied what people were doing, I was kind of like, yeah, I think I could bring some of my techniques and the stuff I've learned doing creatures and stuff into this papier-mâché world and kind of make it my own. Which I did. It took off, and it's been really, really great, really, really fun. I live up here in Portland now, and I've hooked up with a whole bunch of other artists, and most of them have some media or entertainment industry careers or experience, and so we have a lot in common. So we've formed our little artist collective called Dark Arbor Lodge, It's pretty amazing because it's just a bunch of seriously creative, talented artists who just like to hang out and have become good friends. It's really magical. I've not experienced anything like that before in my life. There was always the gang that you hang around with, but it wasn't like Dark Arbor Lodge, where we're meeting and we're planning and we're, just shooting the breeze, trying to come up with crazy ideas or whatever. It's really, really rewarding. This is a great time of life for me. It's really amazingly fun to be able to do the stuff I want to do and have the time to do it.
Don Post was a huge influence on me as a kid. I remember going into the local magic shop and seeing this various monster masks and stuff on the wall, and always just saving every bit of my allowance and paper route money and stuff like that to bring home rubber monsters. You got to work there for a bit. Can you talk a little about Don Post Studios and what that was like for you?
Yeah, so I first moved to LA. I got a job at Disney Shipping Film for a year. I quit to go to film school, ran out of money, and needed a job. Now, I knew Don Post. Obviously, all monster kids know Don Post. And I was desperate for a job. I didn't know where to turn or where to look. So I called up Don Post Studios. I said, are you looking for any workers? Are you hiring? And the supervisor said, well, we are looking for an airbrush artist, actually. Are you any good with an airbrush? I said, oh, yeah, sure. I'm pretty good, I think. And he said, well, can you come in tomorrow and we'll see what you can do? And I said, great. We hung up and realized I had no idea what an airbrush was. I had never even heard the term before. So I ran to the hardware store, and they had a really cheap, I think it was like $7, Badger like starter airbrush and a can of compressed air, and I practiced like mad with that till the air ran out. Next day I went into Don Post, and there was a tonal test on a Oliver Hardy mask. And so the supervisor, this was a 3-color red, blue, and green tonal test. And so he painted one half in these 3 tones, and I had to match it, which is actually kind of a tough challenge for a newcomer to airbrushing. Anyway, whether it was actual talent or pure darn luck, I managed to match it pretty darn well. The supervisor was quite impressed, and I was hired right away. I started as a production line mask painter, and these were the much cheaper, not full head, just over the head Halloween masks. Clown, witch, a bum, an old man, whatever it was. Very simple. They usually got 3 colors of paint on them. The goal for all of these, each of these painters, there were 4 or 5 of us, I think, maybe, was to paint an entire gross, 144 of these masks every day. It's a lot of masks. So you're literally like grabbing it, flipping it around, and going through one color through 144, go through the next color with 144 until you're done with them. And I did pretty good, I have to say. And so fairly quickly, I was only at Don Post for a year, fairly quickly they moved me to the custom paint department. Now this was the place to be as far as I was concerned, because this is where they were painting all the monster masks, all the custom monster masks. And it was great, like learning so much, so fast. It was fantastic. Don Post was incredibly valuable for me, not just because I got to paint rubber masks and stuff, but I got to watch the whole production. I watched, I saw how they were making their molds, how they were running their latex, how they were doing. I was taught hair work there at Don Post. I mean, I could do it beforehand, but I learned a lot more there. And I'll never forget, it was Bill Malone was sort of head of the lab at that point. I had just started in the custom paint department, so I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. I'm going to be doing all kind of shading and cool veining and all kind of, great airbrush fun stuff. So I think it was my first day, and Bill Malone comes out with a Captain Kirk rubber mask, and they were casting, all the custom masks were cast in black latex, and so he's going, I want this painted up, and my eyes are like going, yeah, this is it, this is my chance, I'm gonna get to do all kind of cool stuff on this. And I'm going, well, what do you want? He said, just paint it white. I'm like, oh, like white, or you want some shading, you want some blue tones in it? Just paint it white. I'm like, oh, God. Okay, so I painted it white and dismissed it. Well, sure, it was the primo Halloween mask, so for the film, which I didn't actually know until years later. So that was fun. So Don Post was a huge stepping stone for me. I worked my way up. They actually hired me to work in the lab. I was there for a few months and did a few projects, TV commercials, and worked out some hair patterns and things like that. And then I was taken aside by the supervisor of the company and basically said, we really see a big future for you here. And I'm like, going, great, because Don Post was doing all these TV commercials and film work. I'm like, this is going to be like me getting into the movie business for real. And the next thing he said was, but we're going to cut out all the movie TV stuff. We're just going to concentrate on making Halloween masks. So by that point, I'd spent a year making Halloween masks, so I kind of got that down. I didn't think there was a big future for me in that. So Bob Short, who was also working there at the time, and I formed a limited partnership for like the next year, and we did a whole bunch of odd little projects. But it was very strange because at the end of the year, we kind of looked at each other and kind of said, well, we've done all these projects, but we've only done like 3 of them together. We were basically loners that we were just like occasionally work together. So that partnership didn't last. But that all came out of Don Post Studios, and that really was the doorway for me into the film business.
Okay, so I have to ask, you worked on Airplane, correct? Was that before ILM? What did you do on it? It's a favorite film for so many folks I know.
I did work on Airplane, and that was during Bob Short and I's partnership. And we didn't do a lot on it. I did a beating heart on a desk. We did some like rubber props, stunt props, and things like that. I really don't remember. We did like 4 or 5 things, maybe more, but it wasn't a lot. But it was fun, you know. It was kind of intimidating to work with those crazies because those guys were pretty crazy. But it was fun, you know. It was a great movie.
How is it that you came to be at ILM?
So, the whole ILM story was that this also came out of Don Post Studios. I think it was John Berg and Phil Tippett came to Don Post Studios to see if they could get a production run of Rubber Piranhas for the film Piranha. Wound up being too expensive. So they left, they went and walked away or whatever. But then John Berg came back and asked if they had any people that could help work on the effects team. Well, Bob Short could work on the FX team. So he did. He was a certified diver and all that. So this was for all the underwater stuff at the pool at USC, I think it was. And so they started production and oh yeah, oh god, they did this, they had to do some underwater tests, and this was in January in the pool, and it was not a heated pool, and they asked me to come out and be a test subject for some blood effects and stuff, tubing and whatever. And so they all got to wear wetsuits, and I didn't. So I'm like in the water turning blue, and that was a pretty crazy time. But then this was before actually filming of the effects stuff, which was a little later. And then they started doing the underwater stuff and realized they were understaffed. And so Bob Short said, I know Chris Wallace is great, does all kind of cool stuff, whatever you want, he'll do that. And so they brought me in on that, and that was, again, you know, my entryway into actual filmmaking. Piranha was the first film I actually ever worked on. It's technically not true, because at Don Post Studios I cut out rubber spiders for Kingdom of the Spiders. So then I had a relationship with John and Phil, and this was, I can't remember, maybe a year later even, and Phil asked if I would be available to come work at ILM. Basically making molds was going to be my job for Dragonslayer. So I got a 1-year contract specifically for Dragonslayer, which was cool. We got to make a great dragon, I think. It was a lot of work. I got to do a lot of different stuff, you know, sculpting, mold making. I did a lot of the running of stuff. I did a couple of specific rigs, like a mechanical claw for a close-up of it flying at Ralph Richardson or whatever. So that was a great experience, and I got to work with the top people in the entire industry at the time. So it was heaven on earth.
So years back, we restored one of the giant Dragonslayer heads. It was amazing. I know you worked on that film along with some other ILM greats. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Ken Ralston sculpted the baby dragons. I ran all the molds. I ran all the puppetry. Did all the armatures for them. The head getting cut off. All that stuff. I sculpted all the pieces for the walking dragon that Phil animated, and ran all those pieces. All Phil assembled and painted it. I did a big section of wing, bunch of odds, like just odds and ends, because there were a lot of like, we just need one close-up of part of the tail for one shot kind of thing, and so okay, crank that out. But Dragonslayer was really great. And of course I did the puppet head, the close-up puppet head. That was basically after they'd filmed everything and realized they just couldn't get the footage that they needed with the big mechanical head. So that was my big part of Dragonslayer. I did a lot of stuff on that.
We have a mutual friend in Bob Burns. He and Kathy have just been some of the most supportive folks I've known. I think any FX person or monster artist that knows them has that same feeling. I always see a lot of your work in their museum. Were they big influences on you?
Mutual friends at Bob Burns, hell yes. So Bob Burns was, you know, if you're a monster kid, you know, Bob Burns was a legend. And I came from the East Coast at the time, and so the whole West Coast experience for me was brand new. And meeting Bob Burns, I actually met Bob Burns on Gremlins when he brought the time machine for filming. But I was so crazy at the time, I didn't remember that. Where I really hit it off with Bob was when we went on a trip, both went on a trip to Japan. And boy, did we bond. I mean, we were just like, every subject that came up was kind of like, you too? I'm so into that, you know. It was just like, it was a Marx toy collector. I was a Marx toy collector. You know, we had all the monster stuff going, and just, you know, we just had a great time on that trip together, and we just became very, very good friends.
Did you ever get to work on any of their Halloween shows?
Obviously, you know, we read about Bob's Halloween shows in, I can't remember, was it Starlog or Fangoria or something like that. And you know, it was just like, to monster kids everywhere, that was just like the epitome of what Halloween should really be. And so I always wanted to work on one. I never did get to work on one. He had stopped doing those by the time he and I connected. So, and then there was one other one that he did later on The Thing, but no, was it The Thing? I think it was The Thing. And but I was completely unavailable at the time. So no, although Bob and I spent many years sort of together, but I never got a chance to actually work with him on anything.
You began in creature effects at a time that was an absolute explosion of innovation. What was that like?
I became a monster maker at like probably the best possible time in the history of film, because I was at Don Post when Star Wars came out, and so the timing worked out incredibly well. My leaving Don Post and sort of getting into doing props and creatures and stuff, and it was insane. I mean, it was just insane. There were so many rip-offs happening so fast, and so many TV commercials that needed aliens, so many TV pilots that needed aliens, TV shows that were sci-fi all of a sudden. And so this was like just this, what had been a pretty dead marketplace exploded, like completely exploded. Part of that led to everybody sort of starting to push the envelope a little bit more with techniques and materials were changing at the time. This was also the time when stuff like urethanes became much softer, more pliable, more usable for skinning things. This was a time when silicone was really in development as well, and it was getting much more dependable, versatile. So it wasn't just a bunch more work, it was a bunch more options. And so as these materials became better and more available, they became adapted to new techniques. So suddenly you can do things where you couldn't do them a year ago because the material just wasn't there yet. So it was a very, very innovative time, and it was innovative in a way that was, I think, unique, because it was not really linear. It wasn't kind of like, here's the way it was done before, here's a product that will let you take it to the next step kind of thing. It was really more about, wow, here's this wild thing, it just kind of can do a whole bunch of stuff, where can we push this? And it was very scattered, sort of shotgun style approach to effects at the time, because there wasn't a lot of history for animatronics, involved puppetry. Obviously the special effects makeup had been developing really well, with led of course by Dick Smith, but stuff like radio control coming in and all this stuff was kind of like continually happening. All these new techniques and materials were all getting incorporated into the effects stuff right away, like really right away. A little too fast sometimes, but yeah, it was amazing. And you didn't think about it. It wasn't kind of like, wow, this is an amazing time. It was just kind of like you were too busy drinking in all this stuff to try and figure out how to make it work for you. But it was great. It was a great time. It was this wonderful finding time. I think for all the effects guys, it was kind of like you suddenly realize, hey, I can do stuff that I really never imagined I'd be able to do, just because I've just learned how to do this mechanically, and it works perfectly with this new material. So it really was a very, very unique time.
How did you feel about Star Wars at the time?
It was interesting for me because I was a George Lucas fan from THX, and Star Wars had originally been written up as a space battle told from the enemy's side or something like that. That was sort of like the Hollywood line that had come out a year or two before the film. I was still at Don Post when it came out. My dad was in town visiting, and you'll love this. At Don Post, I got a whole bunch of free tickets, and nobody wanted them. I mean, nobody wanted free tickets to the movies. I'm like going, I love movies. I want to see this movie. I'll take the tickets. So I took my dad to see it. This was a showing at Fox. And I was blown away. I mean, just totally blown away. But even better was seeing my dad like totally blown away. because he said it just reminds me of when I was a kid and Flash Gordon came out. You know, for us it was so real and so incredibly cool, and this has that same feel. And I'm going, okay, this is one of those great moments of experiencing humanity. It was really fun. I mean, really great. Just great to see my dad so excited about it, and just great to get so excited about it myself. Because obviously, you know, at that point there hadn't been anything really like that, and science fiction had been a very quiet genre for quite a while. There was the occasional big picture, but not a lot. It was kind of a dry time that it came out. So it was, yeah, I mean, I loved it. Huge fan about it. So obviously, you know, when I was asked to work at ILM, it was kind of like, okay, that was the pinnacle of what you could possibly be in the effects industry at the time, was someone working on a Star Wars movie. And so, yeah, like when they asked, it wasn't like I'm going to go, I don't, ILM, yeah, I know it's a big deal, but no, it's like, it's the deal. So that was great, you know. I had this just entire roller coaster ride in my career, from the start of it to, you know, I don't know, I guess maybe The Fly or after that, but it was just like relentless. It was just project after project. In the early days on the little stuff, I was working on 4 or 5 projects at a time. And there was one point I was working on 13 projects at the same time. They were all small, but it was pretty crazy.
So, Return of the Jedi comes around, and Phil said you were originally going to hit the creature shop and even did some of the hiring before that you had to leave for other work. Who did you hire and why?
That was an interesting time at ILM. I worked on 3 pictures while I was there. I worked on Dragonslayer, worked on Raiders, and worked on Jedi. And on Jedi I was doing designs and designing the creature shop and setting that all up, just physically. I hired a few people, basically looking for trainees more than anything else. It wasn't like I was going to say we have to hire the top crew out of LA, because that budget wasn't really there then. But I hired Kirk Thatcher, who was a friend of Joe Johnston's, came up to visit and said he was really interested, and seemed like a good guy, seemed like he was talented, so I hired him. My contract ran out at ILM, and they were at a point where they had put ceilings on what they were paying employees and stuff like that. And I knew I could do a lot better on my own, so I bid farewell to ILM, which was kind of sad, because great people there, amazing talent, just such a learning process, a very intense learning year for me.
You did a number of the creature designs for that film, and most of these were as small-scale maquettes. When did you do those maquettes?
Yes, so I did a ton of maquettes and some sketches as well for Jedi while I was on Raiders and Dragonslayer. It was a very crazy time there for me, because I was filming on Raiders, I was filming on Dragonslayer on the same day. We'd go do morning shoots on Dragonslayer, puppet heads or whatever it is, and then it's do a test on the Raider, one of the Raiders' heads or something like that, while prepping the next ones. So it was very, very busy. And so when Phil said, well, we have to do a whole bunch of maquettes as well, I'm like, okay. So it was literally, film a shot on one stage, run upstairs to either the rubber room or the art department, sculpt as fast as possible, sculpt maquettes, and put them in the oven, run back down, do another shot, run back up, take the maquette out, let it cool down, run back down, set up another shot. There's a break, run upstairs, spend lunch, sculpting and painting maquettes, and then there were actually a bunch I did at home that I never even turned in, because I left before I had a chance to turn them in. But it was very, very busy. I mean, I would get there early and I would start doing maquettes just to like wake up over coffee basically. And we did quite a few. I wasn't sure. We didn't have a script. We didn't have Ralph McQuarrie designs or anything like that. There was no reference at that point. We basically had no information other than make a bunch of alien designs. Okay? I mean, the only guideline we really had was it's probably mostly going to be masks and hands. So that's what it was. And, I'm asking Phil, so what is George's process for this? What should I be looking to do? And Phil just said, just do as many as possible. George usually says no to everything. So the first time George comes in to see this first batch of maquettes we'd done, he comes, oh, cool, I like all of them, they're good. It was just absurd because some of the maquettes had been raced through really, really quickly, particularly by me. I'm a pretty fast sculptor, I certainly was at the time, but I raced through a few of those a bit too quickly.
So it seems like a high percentage of the designs you made wound up in the films, and even some of them are fan favorites. From a design point of view, what do you think makes a good monster?
Okay, that's a good question. What do I think it makes a good monster? I would say two things. Most importantly would be readability. And by readability, I mean that you look at the creature and you can identify that creature immediately. Like within the first 2 or 3 seconds, you kind of get, okay, I know where every part of that creature is. I know what that is. Sometimes you get a design that's just way too busy or way too subtle or whatever it is, but it lacks that immediacy in the design. And I always go for that. I always go for that kind of like, okay, I got that thing right away. I know what that is. Because I think that that lets you play with the subtleties on the next level of detail. The other thing I would say is really critical is relatability. It's different from readability. Readability is identifying something. Relatability is essentially being able to put either an emotion or a humanity to it. So relatability is you really see it's a scaly creature, blah blah blah, whatever. Relatability is I'm terrified of that, or I can see the character of life in it. So those are two of I think that for me the two most critical aspects of creature design. And it's particularly challenging when you're doing aliens because you kind of want it to not look human at all, but you still want it to be relatable, and so it's difficult to get away from the human proportions, at least between the eyes and the mouth. So you'll see on some of my designs, they're bigger heads or whatever, but the spacing between the eyes and the mouth is still very proportional to that human triangle. So that's designing aliens.
Were there any designs that were influenced by existing creatures or old movie monsters?
That's a definite yes. So I did. Nature's so inspiring. It's whatever you think you can come up with that's incredible and new and different. Nature's like been there, done that. You want to see something? Look at this, and you're like, whoa. So I always use nature as a reference. I'm always looking and studying animals and things like that, and looking at the natural forms that are within these creatures, these animals, the unique features, something, whatever's a little bit different. It's commonplace now. Back then, we were still early on the alien monsters scenario, the whole avalanche of creature work that came out of the 80s. So for me, I've got to look through the reference here. where the real world, where nature influenced me was on a couple of them. There's one that's it's listed here as a bug alien, but it's actually taken from a Lystrosaurus, which was a little mammal-like reptile that lived way, way back when. But it's got the same sort of face of that.
How do you think the final creatures looked compared to the concept maquettes that you made?
You know, I have to say, I think they did a great job of copying the maquette designs. I mean, they were pretty straightforward, but they didn't seem to have played a lot around with the basic design. It was following it through, and I think they did a great job. I think they all look good.
So, this is like the lightning round. I'd love to just talk about a few of the more interesting maquettes that you had. Like I said, there's a pretty good bunch of these that you got to work on. So starting with Riggies, let's talk about a few of those, and you can kind of just tell us a little bit about each if you don't mind.
See, you have to understand, I didn't know any of my maquettes by the final names. We had our own names for them. So I never actually learned what the film names were. Riggies, which I knew as Three Eyes. And that was, really for me, it was sort of a fun upgrade of an old Irwin Allen style monster from, Lost in Space or Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. I saw it as, because it was, it was very exaggerated. It's got these big eyes out on stalks, and got almost a bovine sort of muzzle. But that was a fun one. I enjoyed sculpting that one. I remember sculpting that one. It was just kind of like, it seemed a bit silly to me at the time. I didn't think it was actually going to get chosen, but it did, so that was cool.
Next up would be Toothface, a.k.a. the Whipped.
Toothface is very specifically taken from one species, and that is, I think it's a South Asian bush pig or something like that. It's very much what I did in that design. I basically took a long boar head and crushed the front and back ends and removed the nose and the ears. So that was an easy one. That was very straightforward, and it was an animal that I was very familiar with. I find a lot of inspiration in all the various pig forms.
The next one is a Jabba the Hutt concept bust. This one always felt very Ralph McQuarrie to me. Can you talk a little bit about this sculpt, how it came to be? It's a really beautiful little piece.
I actually did a bunch of Jabba designs, only a few of which I even submitted. The one you're referring to, I haven't seen Ralph McQuarrie's design. I don't think Ralph had even been working on the project when we were working on it. And Joe Johnson had asked me to come up with a few alternate Jabba designs, and so I did. And that one was just that was more from Joe's description than anything else, because we had very, very, very little to go on in terms of designing these characters and what they were supposed to be able to do or not do. We didn't have a script, we didn't have storyboard, we didn't have anything. Basically do a bunch of aliens. So that's one of my Jabba ones. I think that one was based more on it being a guy in a suit, rather than some of the other ones which are designed as puppets or, operated by various different ways.
Squidhead, it's funny, the final creature is very cool, obviously kind of iconic. There was an action figure, everything. The maquette is kind of gross. He's very slimy looking. What are your thoughts on that one?
Squidhead was a fun one for me. I actually, I like the challenge of trying to take the concept of a squid, which is a lot more involved than squid head, and sort of alienizing it. So I just obviously did the selective compression. I reduced the number of tentacles, and what are fins on the squid I turned into these, strange little organic side things that do something that aliens do. So it was fun. It was a really good time. I love designing aliens. I love designing creatures. I mean, I'm all about creatures. I love doing all kind of practical effects, but I'm a creature guy from day one. I mean, I just love coming up with variations on creature themes. So this whole Jedi experience was just like, yeah, bring it on.
The mole guy, who they cleverly called Elam, which mole spelled backwards.
Elam Mole guy. Yeah, so mole is taken partially from, I think it's a sun spider. It's an arthropod that has like really, really powerful jaws on it. I changed the eyes on it and put nostrils on it and made it furry, but the inspiration was from a real world creature.
I love that there's some faux fur in this. Do you like adding other elements and things like that into your sculpts?
The whole thing about fur is just one aspect of dealing with these maquettes, because they were all done in Sculpey, Super Sculpey, I guess, and you can vary the textures on them a lot. You can make them look very, very different, but it's always nice to add another dimension to the singular material you're working with. So whether that was adding costuming or weaponry or whatever, it really made a difference. So yeah, the whole thing about adding fur was actually to make, because we didn't know whether these were just going to be masks and hands with costumes or full suits. So a lot of the fur ones are kind of like, fursuits are easier to make than other kinds of suits, so this will be simpler. So that's why there's a couple that just have fur for no real reason.
The next up is Ishi-Tib, also sometimes known as a starfish alien. He's got kind of a beak on him, very, very interesting anatomy. Where'd this design come from?
Ishi-Tib. Okay, I gotta tell you, Ishi-Tib, which I don't even remember what I called him when I made him, but that was my favorite design. I mean, that's a real Chris Walas design. That's one where it's not based on anything. It was more about playing with the forms and seeing what the clay told me to do, and I really, really liked it. I kind of wish I hadn't done it for Jedi and done it just for myself, but it's definitely my favorite design that I did for the show.
There's also a beast of burden that never made it into the movie. I might have turned up in one of the Ewoks movies. I have to look back on that, but that the maquette seems to be built over a horse figure. Can you talk about that one?
Ah, yes. That was one that Phil specifically asked me to do. And that was, he wanted to do it on a horse because horse would be easier to work with than an elephant, apparently, or any other animal. So, and it would be big enough to make it, to look larger for the Ewoks. So I ran over to Toys R Us and picked up a buyer. I can't remember what kind of horse it was. And yeah, I threw that one together. That was very, very quick. It was basically designed to be something that you could just literally throw on over a horse. So it's just a 3/4 mask that hangs over the top, and basically different furring and dressing and a sort of reptilian tail for it. It was very quick. I actually didn't like that one at all. I'm glad they didn't do it.
So I'm assuming you've seen Phil's kind of caveman-looking Ewok. You did a few different takes on the Ewoks as well. How do you think the two compared, and maybe even how did they compare to the finals?
Oh, yeah. So the whole design of the Ewoks was intriguing for me. Again, didn't have a lot of information. All this description we had was like they're little furry guys. They're going to be dwarves and midgets dressed up. So, okay, Phil had done his caveman version, which was kind of cool, but it didn't sound like what George was after from what the descriptions I was getting. So I did a whole series of furrier, sort of wombat kind of versions, and I think that's George okayed that one, and I did a whole bunch of stuff for Stuart Freeborn, patterns to follow and things like that, which somewhere along the way got lost and he abandoned them and turned them into teddy bears, which, if that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. But yeah, I mean, I actually really liked my Ewok design. I thought they were kind of cuter than Phil's and not as teddy bear as the final ones. They were more like real animals. Anyway, they didn't use my design.
Last up, there is a really groovy looking Cyclops guy with a goatee. He actually shows up on the cover of the Smithsonian magazine with a bunch of the other maquettes. He feels very Outer Limits to me. I don't know. Can you talk about him at all?
The goatee Cyclops guy. Okay, so that was probably the fastest maquette I did of all of the very fast maquettes I did. I literally like a 2 or 3 minute sculpt, and probably even less for the paint job. Yeah, it was again that was just the filler for this sort of like, we need to show George a slew of like 30 or 40 maquettes, and so pick the 3 you like and make a whole bunch that you don't care about. And that was one that, although I liked what it came out as, it's pretty crude.
How does it feel 40 years later to see so many of these alien designs that you did showing up in modern Star Wars movies, shows, books, video games? Why do you think these designs hold up so well? Why do you think they keep showing up?
Good questions. It feels very strange for me to see any of my stuff continuing on today. The fact that I'm still seeing Gremlins merchandise being cranked out, and people are still telling me, going on about The Fly, and there's still collector's pieces coming out on these films. I love seeing the Star Wars universe getting fleshed out using these designs as entire civilizations, as entire different species, as opposed to just sort of alien dressing in Jabba's hut. In Jabba's place. So I love seeing that. I think that's great. It's great seeing that they're keeping the designs alive, that they're making use of them, that they think they're good enough to last. I think part of the reason they're lasting is that they're pretty decent designs. I mean, some of them, they're good, strong, identifiable, readable, relatable designs that still work. Part of it is also just the fact that they're established parts of the Star Wars universe, so it's always great to see them coming back.
And the last question, I ask this of a lot of folks, do you think practical miniatures, puppets, and models still have a place in film? And I assume I already know the answer is yes, but if so, why do you think that those techniques endure?
I definitely think they do. I mean, CG work has taken over the industry for sure, but in terms of practical effects, there's still a fascination for them. People love to know that somebody put in the ingenuity to trick them. It's just kind of, I love it, especially with miniatures, miniatures are just cool. They're like the best toys on the planet, okay? So it's more that I love finding out that something I assumed was full scale was done as a miniature, and I totally totally accepted it as real. It's just it's not that it's critical anymore because they can do anything with CG, but it's really fun. Okay, it's more rewarding as an audience member to be able to sit there and kind of go, oh man, that's a cool mask. I mean, I love that they did that practical. It's just, there's a feel to practical stuff that actors can relate to when they're filming. So there's still a lot of advantages. Obviously, their presence of these practical effects in films is greatly reduced, but it's not gone. It's still there, especially in other aspects of the entertainment industry. The TV commercials do a lot of practical stuff. So I think there's always going to be room for that in the industry. It's really a matter of where things balance out. You know, it's kind of been just a flood of CGI stuff because it's a technology that's been developing really, really quickly, really, really well. Every time they find a new project, they fix a new every time they find a new problem, they fix a new problem. So it's continually getting better. It's continually getting much more subtle and being used much more subtly. You know, when CGI first came on the scene, it was like everything had to be this gigantic, overblown spectacle because that was suddenly a thing that was a lot cheaper to do with computers. And so it's gotten a little bit more specified. You don't get a lot of those just like random blockbuster, big for the sake of being big kind of films. They're still there, but they're making them a lot better now. Anyway, that's about it for my Jedi creatures time. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of crazy, but it was very inventive, and I got to play with creature design, and you know, that's what I love to do. So, all good.
I hope everybody enjoyed that chat with Chris. I know I certainly did. Thank you so much for your time today. Please remember to subscribe. Please follow us at Tom Spina Designs or at Regal Robot on social everywhere, and keep your eyes open for our archive collection of pieces scanned off of those original maquettes that these brilliant artists made all those years ago. Giving folks a chance to bring those into their homes has been a real pleasure, a real honor, and I'm just very excited to do more of that. So thanks for watching. Please have a great rest of your day, and I wish you all the best.